A wealthy man disguises himself as an ordinary customer to test the waitress's kindness. It was a rainy evening when the diner's bell chimed, announcing a customer no one truly noticed. His clothes were plain, his shoes scuffed, and his expression guarded. To the world he looked like any weary traveler. But behind those watchful eyes hid a man whose fortune was vast and untold. Few could imagine that beneath the disguise of worn denim and a faded jacket stood a millionaire accustomed to luxury. Yet tonight he sought not comfort but truth. The waitress, a young woman with tired eyes but a genuine smile, welcomed him warmly. She didn't glance at his clothes with judgment, nor did she rush to dismiss him. Instead, she offered kindness, a kindness he had come to test, for hidden behind his false image lay a question that burned in his soul: did goodness still exist when wealth could not buy it? Her name was Clara, 23 years old, struggling to support her younger brother after their parents' untimely death. With auburn hair tied neatly back, an apron marked with stains of long shifts, and hands roughened by endless work, Clara was far from the life of glamour the disguised man knew. Yet her spirit was radiant in its simplicity. Every customer received her warmth, whether they left a tip or not. She carried burdens silently, her smile never faltering, though beneath it rested exhaustion. The millionaire watched her closely as she served others before returning to his booth. He wasn't here for the meal, though he ordered the cheapest on the menu. He was here to weigh her heart against the temptations of wealth, and to see if compassion still bloomed in a world drowning in greed. Clara placed a chipped plate of soup before him, apologizing for the diner's humble portions. Her sincerity struck him harder than any lavish feast he had known. "It's not much," she said softly, "but it's warm." That warmth extended beyond the food. It was in her eyes, her tone, the way she asked if he needed anything else despite her exhaustion. The millionaire, still hidden in his disguise, nodded quietly. This was the beginning of his silent experiment. Would she remain kind when his disguise revealed only poverty? Would she dismiss him as so many others had before, or would her kindness prove stronger than appearances? Each word, each gesture, each glance mattered more than she knew. As the night dragged on, the diner grew quiet. Clara noticed the man staring into his empty soup bowl. Hesitant to ask for more, without waiting for him to speak, she returned with a second serving, this time on the house. Her manager frowned, warning her about giving away food, but Clara shrugged it off. "He looks like he needs it more than we need the dollar," she whispered. The millionaire's chest tightened. He had been offered the finest meals across the world, yet none compared to this moment. It was not the soup that filled him, but the unspoken generosity of a heart that gave without expecting return. And with that, his test began to grow more dangerous, for kindness this pure could awaken truths even he was unprepared to face. Clara knew nothing of the man before her. To her, he was only another stranger passing through, another tired soul weathering life's storms. Yet behind his quiet nods he was studying her, judging her without her knowledge. He wondered how many times she had done this before, how often she had given without thought of herself. But his disguise weighed heavily on him. For the first time he felt the sting of invisibility. No one saw the millionaire. They only saw the ragged man before them. It was both liberating and terrifying. If his fortune vanished tomorrow, would anyone still see him as worthy? The waitress's kindness suggested yes, but doubt gnawed at him as shadows deepened around the diner's windows. The other waitresses whispered about him. "Another drifter," one muttered. "Probably won't even tip." Clara defended him gently, her tone quiet but firm. "He's still a person," the disguised millionaire overheard, his jaw tightening. All his wealth, all his accomplishments, yet reduced to a stereotype because of clothes he wore. He realized that perhaps this was how most of the world lived, under constant judgment, unseen and dismissed. Clara's defense struck deeper than she could ever imagine. It wasn't just kindness. It was defiance against cruelty, a shield she raised for someone she barely knew. And that shield, fragile yet strong, was something money could never purchase. As the night wore on, Clara found herself strangely curious about the quiet man. Most customers filled the air with complaints or chatter, but he remained silent, watchful. His eyes followed details others ignored. The flickering neon sign, the uneven tiles, the way she limped slightly from standing too long. "You're very observant," she said nervously, when she caught his gaze. He gave a small smile, one that did not reveal the truth but hinted at secrets untold. For the first time in years, the millionaire felt truly seen, not as a businessman, not as a figure of wealth, but as a soul in disguise. Clara didn't know she was under examination, but she too had begun her own silent study of him. Clara's manager grew impatient. "Stop wasting time on him," he barked quietly. "Focus on the paying customers." But Clara refused to let go of her gentle persistence. She knew struggle when she saw it. She lived it daily. "Everyone deserves kindness," she replied, a flicker of steel in her soft voice. The millionaire noted this with interest. Not only did she give freely, she risked her own standing for the sake of compassion. It was a dangerous trait in a world built on selfishness. Yet it was the very trait he had hoped to find. His heart raced as he realized, the deeper this test went, the harder it would be for him to remain an impartial observer. When the diner's closing hour approached, Clara noticed the man hesitate at the door. His wallet, deliberately emptied for the disguise, carried almost nothing. "Don't worry about it tonight," she whispered, brushing off the unpaid bill. "Come back another time." Her words nearly broke him. He had walked into this place to test her, but now it felt like she was testing him, forcing him to see a world where value wasn't measured in coins. For the first time, he wondered if he had underestimated her. Perhaps the true test was not whether she could see goodness in him, but whether he could see greatness in her. That night he could not sleep. Alone in his luxury hotel room, he stared at the city lights and replayed every word Clara had spoken. The irony burned him. He had wealth beyond measure, yet none of it gave him the peace that her simple kindness had offered. He began to question himself. Was he truly testing her, or had fate orchestrated this night to test him? For a man who owned skyscrapers and fleets of cars, it was unsettling to realize how small he felt in the presence of a waitress who had nothing but gave everything. The disguise had blurred lines he thought he understood, and by morning, his resolve would be tested further than he ever imagined. The following evening, the diner's bell rang once more. Clara, wiping her hands on her apron, turned to see the same weary man step inside. His clothes hadn't changed, his shoes still bore the same scuffs, and his face carried the same tired lines. She greeted him with the same warmth as before, her smile genuine despite her fatigue. The millionaire, hidden again beneath his disguise, studied her closely. Many people grew kind only once, then retreated when generosity went unacknowledged. But Clara's kindness did not fade. It seemed rooted deep within her. He ordered little, just a cup of coffee, yet she treated him as though he were her most important guest. As he watched her bustle between tables, balancing trays and apologies, he felt the growing weight of his secret. He had set out to test her heart, but now his own was under scrutiny. This night was different. Clara paused at his booth, coffee pot in hand, and asked softly, "What brings you here again?" Her eyes were kind, not probing, but her voice carried curiosity. The millionaire hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Passing through," he murmured, keeping his disguise intact. Yet something inside him longed to reveal more, to shed the weight of pretense. Clara nodded, accepting his half-answer without pressing. Instead, she spoke of herself, her younger brother, her dreams of a life beyond the diner, her exhaustion that never quite dimmed her hope. He listened silently, each word piercing deeper. Her honesty stood in sharp contrast to the world he knew, a world filled with false smiles and hidden agendas. Here was a woman with nothing to gain, yet everything to give, and for the first time in years he wanted to truly belong somewhere. Not everyone shared Clara's kindness. That night, 2 rowdy customers mocked the disguised millionaire, calling him a beggar, sneering at his patched jacket. Clara's face hardened and she snapped back at them. Respect cost nothing. The men laughed, but her words silenced them enough for the moment. The millionaire sat still, his jaw tight. He had built his empire to avoid such humiliation, yet here he was experiencing it firsthand. The sting of mockery was sharp, but Clara's defense was sharper. Still, doubt crept into his thoughts. Would her kindness remain if she discovered who he truly was, or would admiration replace compassion once his fortune was revealed? He feared the answer, for wealth had always clouded the purity of relationships. Clara's unwavering stance stirred his admiration, but it also awakened his deepest fear, that he might ruin the very goodness he longed to preserve. After the rowdy men left, Clara quietly slipped an extra pastry onto his table, ignoring the watchful eye of her manager. "You've had a rough night," she said gently, her voice carrying both comfort and defiance. The millionaire stared at the plate, overwhelmed. He had purchased jewels for business partners, estates for family members, and cars for lovers who drifted away. But never had he been given something so small, so ordinary, and yet so deeply meaningful. The pastry was more than food, it was a symbol that kindness could bloom even where there was no wealth, no power, no recognition. He lowered his gaze, realizing he was not the one in control of this test anymore. Each gesture Clara made stripped him of his illusions, and left him bare before his own conscience. For the first time he wondered, could she be the one to teach him what life had hidden all along? But storms do not wait for peace to settle. Clara's manager had grown tired of her generosity. Later that night he cornered her in the back of the diner. "One more free handout," he warned, "and you'll be out of a job." Clara's face paled, yet her eyes didn't falter. The millionaire overheard the exchange from his booth, his heart pounding. He had come here to test kindness, but now he was watching kindness put under fire. Would she retreat to save herself, or would she continue to give despite the risk? His chest tightened with guilt. This was no longer a harmless experiment. It was a real trial with consequences that could strip Clara of the little she had. And as he sat in silence sipping his coffee, he realized the storm he had set in motion might destroy the very soul he had come to admire. The millionaire returned the next evening, uncertain if Clara would still be there. To his relief, she greeted him with the same soft smile, though her eyes carried the weight of unspoken worry. Her manager's threat lingered over her like a storm cloud, yet when an elderly couple entered short of change for their meal, Clara discreetly covered the difference from her own tip jar. The millionaire's chest burned, admiration tangled with guilt. This was no longer a test, it was cruelty. He had set out to prove that kindness was rare, but Clara's heart had proved otherwise again and again, even at great cost. Watching her risk her fragile livelihood for others forced him into a dangerous realization. He could not remain silent much longer. But revealing the truth meant shattering the delicate purity of her actions. Would her kindness lose its light once it was exposed to wealth's shadow? That night, as closing approached, Clara caught him lingering at his booth long after the last customer had left. "You don't talk much," she said gently, sliding into the seat across from him, "but I feel like you carry a heavy weight." Her words cut deeper than she knew. The millionaire clenched his fists beneath the table. For years people had spoken to his fortune, not to his soul. Yet Clara, who knew nothing of who he was, saw the burden he carried. He wanted to confess, tell her everything, from his wealth to the twisted reason he had walked into her life. But fear gripped him. If she looked at him differently afterward, if her kindness changed into admiration or greed, the truth would crush him. Still, her steady gaze stripped away his defenses. "You deserve kindness too," she whispered, as though sensing the storm within him. The next morning the millionaire made a choice. He returned, not in his disguise, but in the sharp-tailored suit that reflected his true life. As he stepped into the diner, conversations hushed, eyes turning toward him. The staff barely recognized him. Clara froze, her tray trembling slightly. Gone was the ragged man with weary eyes. Before her stood a figure of wealth and power. He approached her booth, the same booth he had occupied for days, and finally spoke the words he had held back. "My name is Nathaniel Harlow," he said firmly, his voice echoing with both pride and regret. "I am not who you thought I was. I came here in disguise, to see if kindness still existed in this world." The diner fell silent. Clara's lips parted in shock, her mind struggling to reconcile the two versions of him, the poor drifter and the wealthy stranger. Clara's shock gave way to silence. She stared at him, searching his face for truth. Finally she whispered, "So, all this time I was just part of your game?" Her words stabbed deeper than any insult he had ever endured. Nathaniel shook his head desperately. "No, not a game, a test. And you proved more than I ever imagined. You gave when you had nothing. You risked your job for people you didn't even know. Clara, you reminded me of something I had forgotten. That humanity cannot be bought." Her eyes filled with unshed tears. Not of betrayal, but of the heavy truth. She exhaled slowly, her voice steady. "Kindness is not something you test, Nathaniel. It's something you live." Her words stripped him bare, leaving him with no defense but honesty. For the first time in decades he felt truly humbled. In the days that followed, Nathaniel visited again, this time as himself. No disguises, no lies. Clara kept her job, though her manager treated her differently now, wary of the wealthy man who favored her. But Nathaniel's presence was no longer about wealth or tests. It was about learning from her, from the quiet courage she carried in her worn apron and weary smile. The millionaire who once believed money could buy anything now knew better. Some treasures could never be purchased. They had to be discovered in the hearts of those who gave without expecting. And Clara, the waitress who lived with little, had given him more than his fortune ever had. A glimpse of truth, a reminder of humanity, and a chance at redemption. So remember, kindness is the wealth that never runs out, and the richest hearts are often hidden in the most ordinary places. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one, where hidden truths and human spirit meet in unforgettable ways.